Hello, I'm Ella, and this is Ella Podcasts. Today we're looking at the changing role of the white man in the corporate world. Historically, white men have held the senior positions in business for centuries, but the rise of diversity, equity, and inclusion targets has changed this dramatically over the past decade, as I've witnessed firsthand in my human resources role. HR is now dealing with unfair discrimination lawsuits against companies' DEI policies. Are DEI targets fair? Does meritocracy still exist? Have we reached the point of reverse discrimination against white men? And what does the future of work opportunities look like for young white males entering the workforce now? Here to discuss this contentious topic is Dr. Jonathan Marshall, top psychologist and a former professor. He's a Stanford and Harvard University graduate, and he offers perspective and practical advice. We've got with us Simon J. Littlewood, a journalist, business advisor, and Oxford University graduate. He's widely known for his business and economics commentary on the BBC World Service, and he's the author of the business bestseller, Let the Cash Flow. He's a regular contributor to Global Finance in New York and the founder of the business networking group, The Raffles Crew. And Samir Kothari, who is a fund manager working for an Italian investment fund. He used to work for a top executive search firm hiring predominantly white male leaders. He hails from Texas and has a Master of Science from the University of Houston and comes from a proud Indian heritage. So, first question, is DEI simply correcting the historical imbalance? Simon.
Oh dear, you want to ask me first? I'm going to get into trouble again. Well, no, there is no historical. It's nonsense, okay?
How can you say there's no historical imbalance?
First of all, let's historically look. There are lots of reasons why men have done things and women have done different things, and it's nothing to do with. Well, it's on the whole, it's not to do with some kind of inherent prejudice. It's to do with the realities of life. You know, until about 1815, people in the West lived till about 40 years of age. Women had no way to control their cycles. They had a baby every single year, and many of them died in childbirth. Women, unless they were very rich and very privileged, and that was a tiny minority of women, simply did not have the opportunity to enter into the workplace. And that gradually changed. Longevity for human beings went up by, from my memories, it's 2 years every decade from the Napoleonic times onwards, till it started going back again in the US last year. But it's hit about 85 to 90. And what's happened is, because of longevity, because of the ability to manage menstrual cycles and things like that more effectively, and the ability particularly to control whether or not you want to have children, women are now available and able to participate in the workforce in a way that they weren't. I'm not saying that's not the only reason, but the reality is, you know, the representation of women in the workforce has grown and grown and grown and grown. So this whole notion of trying to, you know, looking back and presupposing that because women, you know, the chairman of the Bank of England wasn't a woman in 1860, this is not some terrible historical wrong. It's just a reality of how the world was. And now the world's different, and that's wonderful. You know, I have a beautiful daughter, and I've always told her she can have absolutely anything, provided she works for it, and indeed she has, and she's doing really well. Right. She's lovely, she's clever, and she doesn't need to be compensated for in the selection process at work or university. She's perfectly capable of holding her own against any stupid man, and I would back her 100% to do that.
But there still had to be women pioneering, giving that space and opportunity to women. I mean, if you look at, I was reading a book about the Challenger spacecraft and the history of women.
The one that blew up.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
Was she the pilot?
That's horrible.
All right.
But looking at, you know, women historically getting into those roles, such as astronauts, the amount of, it's not just hard work and intelligence. Doors had to be kicked open by women to get those roles. And your daughter is benefiting from the fact there's been 30 years worth of women pushing that glass ceiling, you know, wanting positions on the board, wanting senior management roles. And DEI had to come about in order to open up opportunities, not just for women, but people of color or minorities. And from my perspective, you know, that means some people had to be shuffled off to make room for those people, and that's what's seen this massive change in the diverse workplace.
So your question is reverse sort of DEI relative to white men, right? Or
Yeah.
So let's look at, from my experience, two different markets, right? Japan, let's say I worked in Tokyo before, and I've worked in Singapore. And I'll get to the women thing, right? But having a expat boss, a white boss, for example, and it doesn't have to be a white guy, right? Could be an Indian American, a Chinese American, a Korean American, in a diverse cultural environment like Singapore, where you've got the locals, for example, and then you've got, if it's in finance, you've got a huge contingent of Indians from India, right? And both, you don't want one side to get the jump on the other because they'll exterminate the other guys, right? In from a work standpoint. So the expat guy generally keeps the peace, between the different ethnic groups, right? In a Japanese environment, also, I mean, more homogeneous, obviously, but you need that expat guy there primarily so they don't turn the corporate culture into the camp at the bridge of the River Kwai, right? So that's
What does that mean?
don't know.
Have you seen that movie, The Bridge on the River Kwai? You
It's a
have.
great movie.
It used to be said, when I first came to
On a
Asia,
true-
the
true
advantage
story.
of a white man is that they're equally hated by everybody. Whereas the complexities of having sort of Japanese and Indian and Indonesians and the complexities of who hates who and how all that works out is very difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Well, even that is like galvanizing and making everyone, sort of focused on one thing, right? Which
I'm happy to be equally hated.
That's right. That's right. Right. And then you've got. So I think the most disruptive thing, it's not really the white man issue, right? It's the white liberal woman in the workplace. I mean, look at the Fortune 500.
Right, Samir, I would like to backtrack slightly
Yeah.
before we get on
Yeah.
to specifically women in the workplace.
Well, you brought up women, so I'm
Well,
bringing it up.
I used it as what used to be a minority group in leadership roles. So we're looking today at how white men have had to move aside to create the room for minorities to come up in the workplace. And where does that leave the white man now? Because we keep reading about how
We need to bring them back.
how now they are actually the most discriminated against
I know.
group.
I don't think that's actually true, but I don't think they are the most discriminated. If you look at the academy in the U.S. and you look at the re-engineering that's gone on in Harvard's entry policy, where people are adjusted based on race, it's the actual Asians that come off worse because if people,
Indians, yeah.
if people were applying entirely based on merit. The Indians and Chinese
that's right.
would win nearly all the top places. So the negative adjustment that's had to be made to make Black Americans and others a more significant proportion of the Harvard intake has actually hit Asians much harder than it's hit whites.
That's interesting.
That's a good point.
It's not as simple as that. Look, it's another one of these things that sounds like a really good idea, and in reality, it absolutely sucks. Yeah. I mean, first of all, women are not the same as man. I'm sorry. I think a woman every human being should have the opportunity to be whatever they want. But the notion that women want the same things as men, I just don't think it's true. It's not true of my daughter. It wasn't true of my mother. My aunt, who was an Oxford
I don't
graduate.
think you can speak for the entire female
Well,
population
I'm just thinking
on the
about
planet.
people that I know. I mean,
I know
that's
plenty
all.
of ambitious women who
I'm
do
not
want to
saying
be
there
on
aren't.
the board.
I'm not saying there aren't any ambitious women. I'm just saying that they are far fewer in number than ambitious men who are prepared to make the sacrifices necessary to be at the top of industry, because it's pretty punishing to do that. And I think before I finish, the other thing is that the adjustments that have to be made are only made in respect of the most attractive sectors. I mean, nobody's arguing, as far as I know, that women should be in charge of all the shifts in a coal
C-suite jobs.
in a coal mine.
Good point.
Or should be on the top of a pylon building electricity lines, or should be at the top of a skyscraper in New York running a construction team. Somehow none of that matters. Men are leading and supporting all of those activities. Anything that you use that's built is built by a man, and probably designed by a man as well. What this is it's very picky. It's a small number of women, and I say this with the greatest respect. You know, I generally like women. You know, I have done all my life.
So you say. So
So is that it's very specific. So for example, now a majority of women now comprise more partners in law firms than do men in America. HR in the hospitality industry and other more women than men. So in certain industries, they're doing better than men. I've got nothing against that. But the reality is women don't want to be equally represented in every professional sphere. They want to be equally represented in the nice ones, while men do all the other crap stuff. I mean, that's the way I see it.
Yeah, but DEI has a way of pushing up a certain type of woman within leadership.
Can we get off the subject of just women? We're looking at
all right. Well, because
minorities.
It's important. Well,
and
they're a
women.
minority, right? I mean, and you're pushing up a specific type of individual, okay? And you can see just recently with Pepsi and with what happened with Bud Light, right? And it's the same type of people.
It has changed because my children are mixed race. You know, the mother of my children's from northern India, very dark skinned, lovely, beautiful woman. And my children are sort of my son, because they're not all the children of mixed marriages look the same. My son's got quite a dark complexion. If he goes out in the sun for an hour, he goes dark. My daughter is more like me. She goes kind of pink, you know, if she gets in the sun. They're mixed race. You know, they could play the mixed race card if they were being, you know, interviewed by the BBC. But what I always said when this came up on the BBC, and it came up a lot, is I said I wouldn't want my human beings are sacred. We all have of the sacred in us and the ability to find a place in creation and be useful and be ourselves and be authentic. I can't imagine anything worse than thinking that whatever you got because you happen to be the right person on the list to get it. I.e., it's not directly referenced to your aptitude, your ability, your demonstrated achievements. I can't imagine anything more dismal than that. And that's exactly what we're seeing, the consequences of that in North America now. We're seeing, you know,
unqualified people.
The head of fire brigades who've, you know, they've just appointed one in New York. Bless her. You know, she's gay, she's black. She's never fought a fire. She's never been in the fire industry. And she's in charge of tens of thousands of mostly men who are supposed to run into burning buildings and risk their lives.
Or the head of the armed forces in Canada.
Well, Canada's lost, really.
Yeah,
I mean, Canada's
so same kind of person, right?
Canada's lost to any kind of notion of common sense.
But just going back to your point, but because they've got quotas, because they've got quotas, and you've got, you know, Stanchart actually has a commercial where they're saying that we only have 15% of our senior managers that are women, and we're going to work on that. But that allows for a type of promotion track for a certain type of woman, right? Which is detrimental, I think, to women in general, because they look for these traits, and you can see them in almost every corporate environment. You look at Fortune 500. Whether it's Google
or Yahoo. Are you going to tell us what they are? I'm very curious.
Yeah,
are they the kind of women
traits.
you want to be locked in the stationery cupboard with, or are they something completely different?
I call it a syndrome. Okay, and it is the syndrome. It is the
Just trying to understand.
It's a syndrome, and it's that sort of look. It's the you're not going to like this, but the sort of annoying lesbian school teacher sort of syndrome.
Samir.
You know,
I'm pretty sure
serious.
my great aunt was an annoying lesbian,
right?
school teacher.
And it doesn't mean that they have to be lesbian, but you know, the perception.
That's what's needed to be working in finance
Really?
as a woman.
Okay.
But certainly opportunities do need to be made. And finance and tech.
She's trying to like water that down, but
I don't know what you've
You know,
got
I come
against
from an
gay women.
HR
I mean,
background.
gay women serve a very useful
I'm happy
purpose.
with gay
right,
women.
guys.
They're there to help
Yeah.
men sharpen their game. You
Yeah,
know?
that's right.
For
There you
certain
go. There you go.
industries, We do need to give
need gay women in
opportunities to
certain
women.
industries?
It's not just
Okay,
gay
all right,
women.
all right, all right.
Women in general.
All
So,
right.
for example, finance, tech, energy.
Well, women are.
They're very male dominated.
Right.
And we do want to
they?
see more women break into those
You know,
industries.
all those
Why?
industries that you just mentioned, right? So Yahoo, Google, Facebook were run into the ground by female CEOs,
Carly Fiorina and bloody
right?
HP.
Yeah,
she
I mean,
destroyed it.
it you know,
And what's your takeaway from that?
Don't
they
pick
are
people
promoting
based
a
on their
certain type
genitals.
of some. They're fast tracking certain types of women, and I have worked with women that have been sidelined because they don't fit that narrative, which is very unfair.
I'm kind of curious about it. Can we go there?
Sure. Right.
So what is the fast-tracked woman versus the other?
I feel that they are more woke, more liberal, and sort of fit what the sort of woke liberal sort of senior management would expect a woman should be, versus just looking at like what Simon is saying, which is just merit based.
I think he may need some deprogramming. I don't know whether you do it. I don't know whether you do it.
Yeah, I could join you for a session if you don't mind.
I don't know. Yeah.
You might be able to write a book on that.
It's fascinating. So
Yeah.
you're saying these sort of stereotypically woke women
That's correct.
are being promoted into positions beyond their ability.
Correct. And what ends up happening is that they're the wrong fit for the job, and they do have a very detrimental. I mean, just think about the recent one with Bud Light. I mean, how do you become a marketing? And we've been told, well, women are less quant and more soft skills, right? She had a marketing job. She had only one job to do,
Yeah,
which is
but she had a set of presuppositions, which were that the
Right, but-
working class men who enjoy light
her
beer
her
are
presuppositions
fundamentally
was
bad.
that she did not know what her customer base was, and she was the top global head of marketing. I mean, how the hell do you do that?
Because
right?
you have ideological programming, I guess.
Yeah, correct.
So you're saying she was put into a senior position simply
Because she
of her...
checked all of the boxes, right? So
It's the same
she's
with
Harvard.
same with the
actually.
guy at Jag.
She was Harvard, right?
Same with the guy at Jaguar. Same. I mean, it's happening a lot,
But he was that was a guy, right?
Yeah, but that's a
Yeah.
good point. Well, we don't know, do we? How do you tell?
These days, yeah, that's right. Anyway, but I'm just saying that, and it's not just one CEO, right? I mean, it's one after the other, and they all wreck the stock price. They all then they all teach at Stanford or wherever, right? And all of them get pushed out because no one's happy with the stock price plummeting like 40% or whatever. So you tell me, right? I mean, give me a CEO, successful CEO of a Fortune 500 company that's still around.
But can I push back a little bit on this because I think there's a danger that we might be perceived as dinosaurs. So let me say this: men love women. Men, on the whole, will do anything to help other people, particularly.
but they love women in a certain context.
Well, no, let me finish, because one of the things I do, and I meet an awful lot of people, and I'm very, very old.
I'm not that old.
I ask women, very successful women who I interview, either on the BBC or on a podcast or whatever, and I remember one in Singapore not long ago. She'd been given a gong by the Queen because she created a $1 billion business, and I said, what's been the toughest impediment to your, making a success of your professional life? And she said, other women. They always say other. Oh, I'm sorry, but they do.
There's good research on that.
They always say other women.
Yeah, that's 100%
So the
factual.
notion that men, are standing in the way. I mean, and speaking for myself, because I've founded 7 companies in Singapore over the years. You lean in, you see something bright, you try and bring someone on. You don't have a quota, because that's an absolutely stupid way to run a business at the end of the day, because if it's my business, I know what I need, but I'm certainly going to give an opportunity to somebody who I think might otherwise not get one, but that's down to me. So again, conservative versus liberal. Liberal, we have to have a set of rules that we follow that ensure that the world is perfect within 50 years. Conservative, it's down to me as an individual to make the right choices that bring people on so that they can fulfill themselves, discover the qualities that have been put in them by
But
the
without the
universe.
DEI targets, I think it would be inevitable. We go back to hiring the same type of people. And typically you hire people like yourself. So, white men tend to hire white men, or, Koreans tend to hire Koreans in their team. It's just a trait. And I've seen this over and over again working in HR. People hire people very similar to themselves. So DEI in some ways has been necessary to break that up, to bring in change, bring in freshness, new ideas, different perspectives. And it has served a purpose in mixing it up.
Yeah, but then you create a track for women to fail, right? Because you're selecting a group of women, which are which essentially there's going to be tissue rejection, essentially, right? So you're forcing this on line managers to hire these individuals.
And we're not just talking about women.
Yeah,
We're
but
talking
in
about
general, right? I mean, okay,
minorities.
we're just talking about women in general, but I mean, okay, for I
So
don't think
people
it's
from underprivileged backgrounds, people who didn't go to Harvard,
yeah, but
Yale,
those people
Stanford,
actually have
Oxford,
to
Cambridge.
prove
Excuse
themselves.
me.
Yeah, but
well,
but
exactly that.
no,
We
no,
didn't.
but-
We
but-
didn't allow women at my Oxford college, just to be clear.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But we did overturn 650 years of tradition in my second year, and we allowed our first women. Yeah. So just because we work as well.
Yeah, I just feel that you're setting up women for failure, right? Essentially, because you're forcing a square peg to and jam it into a round hole.
I think people should be more aware of where there's inequality. I think, like anything, the problem with this notion, which, forgive me, is essentially a Marxist notion, which is that you have to kind of create lists and put people in that are, because there's an ideological component to this as well, as I think Samir was trying to say, which is, the people that you promote as if they're women, they have to tick the boxes as well. You're not going to promote a crazy right wing woman. It's not going to help.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not going to help. It's not
She's
gonna
probably
work.
better at the job.
Yeah,
as well,
yeah. So well, I didn't say that.
yeah.
But what kind of world do we want to live in? I want to live in. Look, either
I think it's a world where there's opportunities.
either
for
women
all.
are the big problem in opportunity, inequality of opportunity, which I wholeheartedly embrace, because if you mobilize women, you're mobilizing another 50% of your adult population. And that's hugely good for any economy. So for the most pragmatic of reasons, let's do it. But in order to do that, you've got to educate them. So if I were looking at the US, I'd say the issue is public education. The issue isn't how we treat women as a class, or blacks as a class. It's 40% of people leave high school in blue cities without knowing how to read or write or
That's right.
add up, right? I mean, that's nothing to do with DEI. It's nothing to do with universities. It's to do with
I agree.
Department of Education run by communists.
So treat
Right.
everyone equally, educate them so that they have the choice. And here in Asia, and I think it's worth saying this, the level of emancipation, I mean that in the broad sense, emancipation of involving people in the broader economy, enabling them, it's at a much more unevolved level. You have women here who have no knowledge of proper methods of contraception. They don't get educated. There's no expectation they can earn their living. I think there's a huge opportunity here to mobilize women, and that's currently an unresolved opportunity, and also to make men take responsibility for the children that they create all the time, which they don't mostly across Southeast Asia. Well,
I think
it's
there's no
but,
question that
you'll
women
see-
are,
Sorry.
and gender and race
Yeah.
have a part to play in hiring and the
Yeah.
positions of power people get. And if you come from low socioeconomic class, that plays into it as well. And I think without some mindfulness around that, we're just going to perpetuate a system which is
Yeah.
static, where those in power maintain power and those without will not have. But DEI is deeply flawed. Like the policies that HR have created have been done ahead of the law, and now there are lawsuits
Yeah,
against
a
DEI
lot.
policies because they were not done in a way in conjunction with the law. And I think to try and create a system which is meritocratic is great. It's never existed. We've always kind of got jobs based on who you know and who
Yes.
likes you and all the rest of it. But trying to create systems that are beneficial for the organization, for society, and for individuals as a whole, that is more meritocratic, sounds to me like a very good ambition. The implementation, though, is deeply difficult.
Let me just jump in real quick. Sorry to interrupt you. But if you look at Asian females in leadership roles, right? And then you look at the sort of more westernized, whether it's white or whatever, right?
Isn't that a bit of a generalization?
Yes,
Asian
it is.
females?
But you do see a very big difference in how they run things, right? So you've got the head of DBS Bank is an ex-UBS bond trader. I can't remember her name, but she's well known and very well liked by men that have worked with her, right? Now, her perspective on how to run the bank is going to be very different than someone that's come through the DEI track, right? Who has a more woke, more sort of chaotic sort of way of running things, for example, versus an Asian woman that has not been sort of influenced or not had to go through that entire sort of DEI track.
I think one of the issues with DEI,
They're more effective. That's what I'm saying.
I think it's
basically.
demoralizing. I mean, again, I'm indebted to Jordan Peterson for this analysis. But if you look at places like Harvard, if you deliberately elevate people whose grades would not, given a level playing field, whose
Yes.
grades would not qualify them, you end up with a very high dropout rate. So you end up taking students who would do very well at a mid-ranking university, but would do less well at a Harvard or an Oxford, and in fact don't do well and end up falling out. So the dropout rates are much, much higher. Now, that's not a good psychological experience. I mean, you think you're doing well, but what you're actually doing is saying, we're going to give you this place, and you're sitting in there with a classroom with a bunch of people, and you can't keep up.
Sometimes you have to be thrown in the deep end and pull yourself up
but
to get to that level.
Well, I don't know.
But I think the main takeaway is that you're getting unqualified people in jobs that they can't handle because of the sort of the extreme abuses of DEI, right? So your point is, well, somebody needed to kick the door open.
Well, that's good.
So we needed
let's
that, right?
agree. Let's agree.
Okay,
the door is
fine.
open.
Well, okay, fine. We all agree that you don't want to alienate 50% of the workforce, right? You want the best of the best. The best of the best. I mean, just look at who is the. Okay, I hate to go back on this political thing again, but it's the left again in all the blue states in the U.S. that keep bitch crying about this, right? And what do? They get these morons that have no business doing those jobs into those roles, right? And every one of them either is incompetent or insider trading or graft or fraud or grifter or whatever, right? So you've got an entire generation of women that have been groomed that are taking on leadership roles in business and whatever.
Be careful with that word groomed.
Yeah. But yeah, that's right. It's a different connotation in the UK standpoint. But they're unable to handle the jobs, right? And then to shut everyone up, this is racism, this is misogyny, blah blah blah, right? And then they go back to this censorship model, which the left always likes to fall back on when they're called out on their stupidity.
Well, I think it's also about hiring against type. So, for example, I've worked in financial services for many years, and you do get a certain type of person who is always that person who gets the promotion, ends up leading the team, ends up becoming the regional CEO, board member, whatever it may be. It has always been a certain type, and they've always gone to certain universities, and they've had a career track, and their parents were in the business before, and that's been the type.
Would you say that HR on the whole reinforced the selection of that type, or changed it?
Yeah, right.
HR typically get told who is being hired. They don't necessarily they're not the decision makers ultimately, sadly. They're not necessarily part of that decision making.
It won't be news to you to know that many people in many industries regard HR as a bit of a nuisance when it comes to trying to make
I am well
things
aware
work.
of that after 20 odd years in the business.
Yeah,
believe me.
And certainly, I have some sympathy for that notion.
So all that DEI is doing is mixing it up. It's creating.
So let's just say what you're saying is true. 30 years ago in Wall Street, there were no Indian CEOs, right? No Indians that ran the fixed income desk, global heads of any of this thing. Then Deutsche came along, then Morgan Stanley promoted somebody. So they were able to overcome this without having a specific DEI doctrine, right? The Indian Americans, right? And the British Indians that ran all of the major global, then Rana Tarwal ran Stanchart. Then you had what's his name, the Indian guy that ran that just passed away recently, that ran Deutsche, right? Anshu Jain.
I'm not a banker, I'm afraid.
No, I'm just saying that so they didn't have any. There were no DEI programs to help the brown man, right? For example. So what are we saying here? That these guys, they don't need help, but these other people need help.
I think what we're saying is that the issue needed to be tabled and it needed to be given a bit of a push. And I struggle with that a little bit because I come from a cultural milieu which is absolutely full of intelligent, successful women and alcoholic, useless men for the most part, including my father and grandfather. So, find that proposition a little bit, but it could be that Britain was a little bit ahead of everywhere else in terms of how we educated women. My great aunt, graduated from Oxford over 100 years ago. She graduated when she could take the exams, but not actually be officially awarded a degree because women weren't actually allowed to have one. She had to go back 30 years later to actually collect her degree. But it didn't stop her. She was intellectually incisive. She did everything that she wanted to do. She would have laughed if you told her that she was somehow disadvantaged by being female. You know, so I don't know whether I'm uncomfortable with that notion that women are disadvantaged.
But there's no DEI in Asia, for example, in Korea, in China, in Hong Kong, in Singapore.
There are voices in Singapore. There are voices
but
on the left.
How are these women then, without DEI, how are they running companies?
I think we do have DEI in Singapore.
Not as
Look at our
aggressive
presidents.
as
You do in some of the multinational companies because they bring their global policies.
But I know, but
But the majority of people are Asian in Asia. That's the thing. So we look at the workforce.
Sure, but I mean, it's
demographic,
diverse, the workforce here, right? So, for example,
But the care that's taken to sort of select who may be president next, like, you know, it's race.
Well, I mean, on that
gender
point, there
and-
are far more female political leaders in Asia than there are
Yes.
until very recently in Europe. I mean, the US has never had a female leader. You know, England's now had three female prime ministers of varying capability. France hasn't. Germany had Merkel. What a disaster that was. And Italy has the wonderful Giorgia Meloni, who I adore. Yeah, but Asia's had, you know, Bangladesh has had a bunch of them. Pakistan's had them. India's had them. Thailand's had them.
I don't know. We should use those as a benchmark for anything. They ran the countries into the ground.
But the proposition is that by nature of your gender, you're disadvantaged. So, you know, that's clearly not the case.
Bhutto and Gandhi it was nepotism, right?
But it was dynastic.
Yeah.
Dynastic might be another word
Okay,
for that.
or that's a more technical term.
Or Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in the Philippines, or Sukarno Putri, Megawati Sukarno Putri in Indonesia. You know, all of them dynastic in nature and pretty useless mostly.
Yes.
To be honest.
But in finance, which is a male-dominated, and which is what you brought up, finance, which is a totally male-dominated environment, 20 years ago, most of the senior leadership in say private banking and in marketing in Hong Kong and Singapore were run by women. This is before any of the global initiatives were in place. The first country manager of Morgan Stanley was a Indian woman that was running all of India.
Can I just say, if there are any women out there, I'm more than happy to stay at home, raise the children, read and write books while you go out and earn a fortune. So if you're out there, you know, and you like the sound of me, perhaps you could write in.
Yeah, I'd like one of those as well.
Well, why not? I'm making,
Well, look, there are plenty of house husbands
I'm making
now.
the
I
subtle
come across
point
that all the time.
that men also do not have the same options. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
We do not.
It's a hard world for us. You know that, right? So anyway,
But we're men, so no problem.
yeah, no problem, of course.
Unless we're
So just the takeaway is that I don't think that we need to, you know, the DEI is causing more problems than it's solving. Okay, maybe the initial idea was okay, but it's moved on to this, like we discussed earlier. It's become a religion now.
I think the emancipation that's needed for gender, for race, needs to start much, much, much earlier. I think if you're doing it where you're gerrymandering, you know, university entrance, or you're gerrymandering senior executive positions, it's too late. What you have to do is you have to, through cultural changes, through education, through the law, making men pay for babies that they create in Asia. They don't do it anywhere. You've got women who are having to work night and day as maids. I'm sure we've all met super intelligent Filipino maids in Singapore. I had one for 15 years when I was a single dad. She could have run a corporation, no problem at all. She had a very high level of social skills, very smart, good financially, charming, you know. But she'd had 3 children by the time she was 17, right? So, and of course, no man in sight. So,
That's a Filipino thing, right?
do better, men.
That's a
Okay,
Filipino
when it comes to that, I can't stand a deadbeat dad. So I think if we're going to do better for women and other minorities, we need to start earlier. We need to build more schools. We need to educate people on how to look after their own health, particularly reproductive health. And we need to give them the opportunity to participate in the workplace by teaching them skills that they can use. These are political choices which need to be made. If we're tinkering, with a carburetor to apply. Yes, I do like a bit of tinkering with carburetors. I grew up on a farm. So if we tinker with the carburetor, when we've got a fully formed engine, it's too late.
Yeah, but you're talking in the context of the third world. Right?
I'm saying, well, I'm
Right?
accepting there's an issue.
In the
that women-
developing world or whatever. Like she's talking
it's the
about
same
the
everywhere.
first world sort of DEI, where you get the syndrome that I discussed.
Were you talking specifically about the first world?
Yeah, you were.
Well, we can look at all types
Africa?
of education. I mean,
Asia?
I was educated in London in a comprehensive school. Believe me, we weren't equipped with any skills to come out and do anything.
Yeah,
of-
but you were
of
in
use.
finance. You got a
I've
job.
had to claw myself up, and it wasn't my first choice.
And
of
without
profession.
DEI,
And
without
you've done
DEI.
a good job of clawing, if I may say
Not
so.
really. I mean,
Okay.
HR was definitely
and
not
without
my first
DEI,
choice of
and without
profession.
DEI.
You know, what would I have become had I had a
Well,
decent
on the other hand,
education?
I was forced to learn ancient Greek when I was 9, and I was beaten if I got it wrong. Was that better or worse?
Look how you turned out. Those are useful skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know. I use my ancient Greek every day.
Exactly.
Question, when I go down to the food court and order chicken rice.
That's right. Yeah.
So going back to white men specifically, I mean, there's definitely people feeling discriminated against now, and we are seeing a rise in lawsuits in the US, in the UK, Europe. It's becoming a big thing, and I know as HR that us and legal have to contend with this now, that men are feeling put out. They're not being included in leadership fast tracks. They're not included in certain programs, training, because of the DEI.
That's why I always tell
targets.
people when I, don't get what I want is the white man keeping the brown man down, right? So there you go. So what about my legal?
What about, how can we just tell you, because I'm a bit overweight.
yeah.
Can we put in a word for overweight?
That's
people
right.
here?
Let's do that.
Because I don't think I'm getting
That's
what I
right.
deserve,
'Cause,
to be
yeah,
perfectly honest.
we're being discriminated against, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Can we adjust for the tubbies?
And for the brown dudes
Yeah.
with a good sense of humor, you know.
Yeah. So,
Yes, DEI doesn't take into account body weight. But,
well, that's not fair.
Body positivity. Hello.
Yeah. So,
Sorry, she's off track now. Okay, go get back on
so
track.
Jonathan, do you think the guys who are
Oh, yeah, you're not able to get two
the voice of
sentences in.
sanity. Let's go
Yeah.
back to the voice of sanity. So, Jonathan, do you think the white dudes who, with their lawsuits, do you think they're doing it because they're feeling put out, or do you think genuinely they're being discriminated against?
I think it's a swing in the pendulum. I think as people are trying to be more inclusive, and I think that's a wonderful intention, but that there are places where it's gone well too far and it's been completely discriminatory. I've worked with some people who, one gentleman in particular, who was promised a job and it went to someone with a totally different demographic, with no industry experience, but to fulfill a quota.
Right.
And it was in this case, not in every, I mean, obviously, this case it just seemed very blatant. But then I think in other cases it's like,
Which industry was that? Sorry.
this was in food and beverage.
Okay.
Manufacturing, certain, I guess that's called food and beverage, yeah. But in other cases, you kind of go, well, maybe it's kind of reasonable that they got the short end of the stick. Maybe it isn't race. Maybe it isn't discriminatory. Or if it is, maybe that is the price for a cultural change. Yeah. So I think in those cases, it's a judgment call and an uncomfortable one. But I think of it as a swing in the pendulum.
And there's
Well,
always going to be winners and losers.
meritocracy-
Somebody has to make room for this to happen.
Yeah, but he can't, like what he mentioned with the fire department thing. It's a reoccurring thing.
it happened in LA.
in LA as well. And it's
Yeah.
the same kind of.
If some man who weighs 120 kilos finds himself in
You're
a fire,
burnt to a crisp.
that's his
Too bad.
fault. Yeah.
But it's like
That's what she said. Have you seen that?
they're supposed to be lesbians, but they look like men, right?
Well,
Sorry,
let's can we come? Perhaps we take a step back from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
lesbians. Maybe another bit
The
of
pretty
therapy
ones,
about
it's
that.
fine, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
They seem to be more competent.
Look. Can we just get back to first principles? Okay.
All right, let's
Is
do
it
that.
or is it not wrong to discriminate against someone based on gender or race?
Wrong.
Either it's wrong or it's right. If it's wrong, then DEI is in essence unlawful, which is why they're getting into trouble at the moment, right? And I personally believe that it is, not because I don't want, women and others to do better. And as a manager, I've always tried to bring people on, but because if you start making one thing we haven't said is that a consequence of having these rules is that there has to be a committee of people deciding whether or not the rules have been accurately followed. In other words, you start measuring a set of metrics, and then someone has to say, I think we need to juice up the Ghanaian lesbians. That's one for you there. Huh?
Is there an epidemic of Ghanaian lesbians that need jobs in finance?
I don't know, it might be. But because it's committee based, which is if you look at the history of the left wing, in China, in Russia, in other places, there's also a committee that makes these decisions. And what happens is that the people on the committee have no other qualification other than that they are political zealots whose job it is to make sure that these rules are followed. And that really is the death knell. And this is what you've got in the universities in America at the moment. What's happened, if you look at the growth in the budgets, and degrees have got more and more expensive, is that the number of people that are actually on faculty versus the number of people that are actually administrators, that number has gone crazy. The number of administrators has gone up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And a big part of what they do is they make sure that all the little boxes are ticked.
That's right. This is the point I made in the beginning of our discussion, which is that the DEI track creates a certain type of individual that is usually incompetent. Because that's the reason why
can we say less competent?
Less competent.
Because the
and I
question
don't think that's all the time. And it was
but it's a big
extremely
percentage.
competent
It's a
people
very
who are now
big
on
percentage.
boards who would never have been on a board before.
I know,
had
but
it
how
not
many
been
of them?
for DEI.
I go back to the CEOs. Look at all of the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 CEOs, and all of them are bummed out. Every single
female
one of them.
ones.
The female ones.
But maybe that's what it takes, just to pave the way for inclusion.
Well, when you blow up your stock price, and then the committee goes back to say, "Look, we don't want that again," right? So it actually destroys the chance for other women to come up, in my opinion.
Be like sort of the far end of the pendulum, though. Like this was now, assuming what you're saying is true, this is too far. But is some version of that appropriate? Something more mild?
Yes, of course. But this goes back to his point, which is it's got to be merit based, and it's got to start at a from an education standpoint at a much earlier stage where boys and girls can compete against each other or for certain things. And no one's getting a leg up on this, right? So I just brought up the whole thing about Indian Americans or British Americans in finance, right? There was no DEI, there was no committee saying, well, we need like 3.7 of these Indian dudes in fixed income, right? Still, how did these guys get there, right?
Merit.
Exactly, right? So what you're essentially doing is you are creating also a backlash. It's exactly what he said about the pendulum. Right, the pendulum then swings in a way in which people despise that, and you're hurting women.
This is actually a very good point. I mean, if and if I could use an analogy, as a management consultant, which is what I've done most of my life, the writing's always been a sideline. If you have variable remuneration in companies, and many companies do, and you have a high level of variable remuneration, and you don't award it based on what everyone can see is performance merit. In other words, you have a supposedly large variable, but you don't award it based on that. You award it based on other things. It says it's based on merit, but it isn't. And I found this over and over again where I've gone into companies and look at this. So you've got a notional, say, 30% variable, and it's supposed to be distributed from the very best performers to the worst performers who get nothing. But you find that the actual distribution doesn't correspond to that at all. It corresponds to other human elements, which are subjective decisions made by people to preserve relationships, propagate certain values, make people more loyal to them, and all these kinds of things. Why is that a bad thing? Because it ensures that the very best people leave, and it ensures that the very worst people stay. Okay? So to the extent that you want the best people, be careful about employing people who demonstrably aren't up to snuff. Because what it's going to do is it's going to demoralize the very best people, and it's going to encourage them to go elsewhere. And this really, in a fast-moving labour market, this is really an issue, I think. And I've seen it time and time again. I always got into trouble when I talk about, I don't. In my own companies, I've always been, a fascist. You impress me. If people ask, what are the working hours? I don't employ them. The working hours are every hour that God sends if we're busy, or go home and shut up if we're not. It's, take ownership, and I'll pay you whatever variable remuneration I think you're worth based on what you contribute to the company. So I know this is very old-fashioned, but having particular frameworks, that you have to adhere to, which are influenced by non-meritocratic criteria, is a catastrophe, particularly in a small business. Big businesses can get away with it, particularly.
No, but they can't actually. So we know someone, the three of us, that his brother-in-law was was told specifically that a global role in this American bank had to be given to a woman because it was time. Not because she was the better candidate. And it was told to him. Right? Come on. I mean, this is.
But life isn't fair. And as I said, sometimes in order to mix things up, there's going to be winners and losers. Somebody has to move aside to let this happen.
Okay, but then life isn't fair. So then you're going to get a CEO that says, you know what? Screw this DEI stuff. Life isn't fair. Too bad. Right?
Yes, but then
so
things
this is
will
the pendulum
never
that
change
I know,
if we
but
take that
I know,
stance.
but this is the pendulum issue that he's talking about, which is you're going to force people to then take drastic action on the other side, which is, you know what? Let's just scrap all of this, right? That's what
And I'm sure she was
Trump administration is doing that.
probably his equal in terms of
Well,
experience.
you're just assuming
and
that,
merit
right? But you're just
for that
assuming
level
that.
of role.
According to him,
For an
that's not the
American
case.
Global bank, of course, she's going to be amazing. She probably had to work twice as hard as him
See,
to get
this is
there.
again your assumptions, man, right? Your assumptions.
Well, I've worked
I'm
in
not
the
gonna
world of
say what
finance
came
for
into
many
my mind
years.
when
No, I know, and you're one of the, I
And
gotta
I can
say,
tell you now, the women I knew in the front office had to be twice as good, if not 3 times as good as any guy in order to be respected. I've met some amazing women in the front office, and they had balls of steel, frankly.
I know, but
because
most of them are
they were-
annoying,
They were up against so much
they
discrimination.
are super annoying.
Okay.
I think that's a really interesting point, the idea that they're annoying, because often I think when women are in these very competitive roles, they have to manipulate themselves to fit
be-
a masculine persona, in which case we call them bitchy. Or
No, I like those type. I'm talking about
This is-
annoying,
I get-
like
I'm
DI annoying. Right?
I'm here-
Entitled. Those women that you're talking about, everyone on the desk loves that trader or loves that salesperson. And I'm serious. And you know that too. The sort of the more sort of ballsy woman.
Yeah, they're formidable.
Yes, all the guys that you never hear guys saying, she's too aggressive, she's too
in
masculine.
your industry, maybe.
Yeah.
But in other industries,
No?
I hear it a lot.
Oh, okay.
a
Because
lot.
it's a man's world, finance. Still, it is a man's
But
world.
they accept
Even in-
women.
Even in hedge funds, I've heard that.
Really? That
women
they
getting
discriminate against?
Yeah, like women being told you're too direct, you're too harsh, you're too straightforward.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
No,
Wow.
literally.
Okay.
I don't know if that's different from the trading world. I
No,
don't know much
I
about
just
that.
decided because I know a couple of women that are in trading.
Yeah.
But all I know is HR. Time and time again, I've had bright local guys and men and women who are bright and they are ambitious, and they get sidelined over and over again for somebody coming in from overseas. And I have made it a bit of a mission of mine to say, hold on, why are we bringing someone in when we have local talent? What you do need to do is invest your time in training them up,
Bringing them on, yeah.
guiding them, mentoring. Yeah, that's what it's going
Well,
to
there's a
take.
specific issue in
but
Singapore. I mean,
They deserve the opportunity.
No, but I think that doesn't happen in Singapore anymore.
It
I mean,
does happen.
it's very localized
It happens
now.
all the time.
And especially with American firms, there are Singaporeans. This TikTok CEO, for example, is a Singaporean. There are several people in Asia that have done extremely well, like in global companies.
But I think you'd be surprised, from my, hands-on perspective, how much pushing had to be involved to create those career pathways. And it wasn't the natural pathway. It had to come with a fight. And I used to fight on behalf of these bright young sparks who deserved a break. And DEI is helping with that.
When you legislate stuff like that, this is what he was talking about. Then you run into problems. Like, I understand, like, the fight that.
Well, I mean, one problem with that, and if we were to broaden this a little bit to look at entitlements as a general topic. So when a government perceives that there is some kind of inequality in the market, and introduces an entitlement, and Lee Kuan Yew is very good on this, on the basis that it will, in due course, correct the anomaly and then it can be withdrawn. No entitlement has ever
been withdrawn. Absolutely.
Ever in the West.
Yeah, and
all that happens is one entitlement, because it's political suicide. If you have a constituency who vote for you, who are getting an allowance, who are getting work because they're female or a job because they're black, if you then withdraw that, they're obviously not going to vote for you. They're going to vote for the other guy who says that he won't withdraw it. So things that are not any kind of incentive, whether it's a choice incentive or a financial incentive, that isn't related to demonstrated performance is a problem for me if you want a performing economy. I mean, I believe we at root, and one of the reasons Europe is in such a terrible mess is that the governments there have completely lost sight of the fact that you need to allow money to be made in order to decide how to spend the money to make a better society. What's
That's
happened is Europe, growth has become impossible in Europe. Growth in France has become impossible. Germany have made so many crass political decisions about climate, about
immigration,
immigration, that they've completely destroyed their own economy. They were the powerhouse of Europe, and they've now got pretty much zero growth. And
because of virtue signaling.
Yes, well, but the virtue signaling is too kind, really.
It's a narrative that they are the climate narrative. Then there was the scrapping of the nuclear power plants. It's all a political narrative.
You remember in his first term, Trump went into the Bundestag and said, you're really stupid depending on Russia for your energy, and they all tittered. Here's this dinosaur and he was completely right.
Completely right.
It's destroyed
Absolutely.
their economy. And energy costs in Germany are 4 times what they are in other countries. So you can't make cars, you can't make steel, you can't do any of these things, and these are all based on political choices. Political choices based on dogma, based on a rigid belief system that rewards you for following a particular line of action. Sorry, DEI is the topic, I know. I want my daughter to feel that she has what she's got, she's earned entirely through her own effort and through coming from a loving home which values women just as much as it values men.
I'm sure she's benefiting from the generations of women pioneering
well,
women in corporate
my
roles.
Mother particularly, and her mother. I mean, yeah, sure.
And she's also benefited, no doubt, from DEI
God, I hope not.
opportunities.
Well, she went to SOAS, which is just full of raving Marxists, but she seems to have escaped largely unscathed from that, thank God. I was very worried about that, about what's happened in the academy and in the UK, coming out of it full of insane nonsense. I think I managed to...
We have the same problem in the U.S., essentially. Everyone is sort of a woke liberal, even not only at the top level, but even at the mid-level, the sort of the mid-tier universities, they're just churning them out.
Well, for me, it's always been, I don't consider myself woke, but I do consider myself to be a fair person and to want fairness in the workplace. And that has always been a battle for fairness. I mean, there'll always be somebody who is someone's son and he's got the job and he's got the, the intelligence
Well, maybe
of a
you
turnip,
come up
but
against someone who's
job.
just a jerk. And it's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is what you're talking about is less of an issue now globally, right?
I don't think it's less of an
Depends where
issue, but I do
you're
think
talking about, really.
DEI has actually had.
I mean,
some
the global
positive
firms.
impact.
Let's look at the global firms, right? So the large global multinationals. I don't think is such a huge problem anymore.
Oh, I think it is.
It's still, you still, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a big emphasis, and I think the millennials are sort of demanding it. They're insisting that the companies they work for meet certain, have a more DEI focus. And the companies that don't, they're losing many candidates from the millennials.
That'll change, fortunately.
And
No,
there's
but
many-
hang on. But this is across the board DEI or specifically to women in the workplace?
I'm guessing across the
the board.
DEI.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a much more consciousness around this, I think, among young employees.
Yeah.
And certainly, it's huge in the US, UK, not so much in Asia. I mean, I always explain to my colleagues, Singapore is like the 1950s, and we really haven't embraced these woke values.
You should go to Japan. That is the 1950s still.
We're hiring locals more. We have quotas now for locals, so that's a kind of a DEI.
Yeah, that's right. 7-1, right? Is the number now?
Well, that's politics, isn't it? I mean, they lost a group representative constituency 3 elections ago. It scared the pants off them. And they lost it because the opposition that won it talked a lot about rich foreigners running around when Singaporeans weren't able to get jobs and had significantly lower incomes. That frightened the PAP sufficiently for them to fundamentally change. Sorry, this is very Singapore specific, but the rules were changed with regard to the requirement to hire locally. It became much higher, the threshold for hiring foreigners and giving them employment passes became much higher in terms of money, in terms of qualifications.
And that's how it should be.
And that's continued.
It should be locals first.
Yes.
Yeah,
it
but
should-
there's creating a bottleneck though in terms of labor here as well.
I mean, I was on Al Jazeera being interviewed 3 elections ago about when I had my own consulting company, which is now gone. But I talked to them and I said, I grew a business in Singapore and it's a wonderful place. It's very friendly, easy to start a company, grow a business, raise kids. But I don't employ Singaporeans because Singaporeans aren't educated; they're trained. And I was making the point that in a business that requires people to think out of the box, so I have complex, poorly defined problems from a major multinational company that's operating in 10 or 12 geographies. I put some structure around it. I put that into a proposal and I give it to a consultant and I say, off you go to Hong Kong. You've got a month, come up with a solution. And I hire somebody from the aforesaid island in which we're sitting. And I go back a month later and they're still sitting there waiting for someone to tell them what to do.
Well, that's why you do have to.
And this is what happened to me
embrace
repeatedly.
training, guiding, mentoring in order to pull people up.
You can't do that
and
in a
bring
small
them to where
company.
you
It's
need
just
to be.
not practical.
You see, this is the reason why if you look at, there's always a comparison between Hong Kong and Singapore, right? So because of post-COVID sort of issues, Hong Kong has become a much easier place to employ, right? So you've got younger expats there at the working level, whereas here now you don't have any young expats coming in, right? Unless they're at Facebook or something. Generally, it's what you're saying.
Well, the problem with, I applaud your sentiment, but the problem with that is, if you're running a small consulting company, and I never had more
I
than
understand,
12
it's
or
not
14
easy with a small
employees,
company.
I can't hire a
I'm
whole bunch
talking
of people
about
and
MNCs.
teach them from zero.
But even
90% of companies are not MNCs in Singapore. 90% of companies are SMEs,
and
right?
all of them have difficulties hiring.
Yeah.
That's not you're just repeating.
The end of that story is they sent an MP to come and talk to me because the bit that I said where Singaporeans are not educated, they're trained, that got clipped and put onto an opposition website.
Is this going to get clipped too?
I don't think so. I think
Before
Singapore.
we do get clipped.
and they came to see me and told me, a nominated MP. Came
She's a
to see me.
Singaporean, so you got to be
Yeah, I am
careful.
a Singaporean.
No, I don't. This is a long time ago, and just they were very nice. It's like being at school in Singapore. It's like being hauled up before the headmaster. Now, Littlewood.
Simon. I think we're going to move swiftly on to our last
They may
final
revoke her
thoughts.
citizenship.
And I'd like us to have a final thought about young white males entering the workforce. What are your last thoughts on that?
Bring them
Jonathan?
back. Bring them back.
Oh, sorry, Samir, bring them back.
Bring them back.
Okay.
We need them.
Yeah.
It's tricky. I think it's not going to be an easy battle, and they're not going to be alone in this kind of potential discrimination. There are many others too, but it's tricky.
I think in Europe, in particular, the worm is turning. You're going to look at big changes in the way that countries look at their own cultures. If you listen to the things Giorgia Meloni is saying now, listen to the things Nigel Farage is saying now, listen to what the AfD is saying in Germany. So I think we're going to look at a Europe in 10 years' time where the role of the white male, the indigenous citizen in creating those societies is going to be much more valued and understood. And I'm all for it.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, a very contentious topic today. Thank you for your time.
We ganged up
guys.
on you today.
Yes, you certainly
Yeah,
did. I'm
yeah.
having to wave the white flag.
Sorry
of
about the
surrender.
Singapore stuff. You can take it out if you want. But I think they're very nice here. I mean, they're
Right, let's not dig the hole deeper, Simon.
But you're not.
Simon, stop it.
We've stopped now.
Okay, I'm going to finish. And,
Wait, are we still recording? Oh,
we've
sorry.
got 30 seconds left.
I thought we stopped.
So, thank you
Okay.
for joining us today on Ella Podcasts. I'm sure we could all debate this polarizing subject all night long. If you want to suggest a topic for our next episode, then please send a message to our Facebook page at Ella Podcasts, and we'll see you for the next session. And please rate and share this podcast. That's really important. Let's strive for fairness and kindness in the workplace, and sending you a big hug.